online
现在
webinar.
将录制本次会议。
I'm going to be discussing the Hytera DMR trunking solutions today, and then also go through some of the benefits, features of the system, and then I'll also talk about the software like the network management software, and then also some dispatching options as well available that you can connect to the DMR trunking solution. Okay, so I did in our first session when we spoke about the migration from analog to digital, I did go through the different tiers, but I'll do it again. So in DMR, you get 3 different tiers: tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So tier 1 is your license-free radios. You buy them off the shelf, you switch them on, and you can use them. There's no ICASA frequency licenses needed. They operate on the 446. The disadvantage with a license-free is that you're sharing that same frequency with other people that might also be using license-free radios, so the chances for interference is much more. And also because the radios are only transmitting at 0.5 watts, you also have limited coverage. Tier 2 is where you would then apply for a frequency from ICASA, and the frequency could either be a simplex frequency, meaning radio to radio, or it could be a duplex frequency, which is radio to repeater to radio. This is for you to be able to have a much better coverage, because on a licensed tier 2 radio, on a VHF it's typically 5 watts, and on a UHF it's typically 4 watts. So your transmission power is much more on a licensed radio versus a license-free. So you do get improved coverage. If you have a repeater, you can have coverage even up to 50 kilometers on a portable, and on mobiles even up to 100 kilometers. And then we have what we call tier 3. So tier 3 is our trunking solution. So it's much similar to tier 2. The only difference is that instead of having only one repeater on the site, you have multiple repeaters, and this gives you more traffic that can go through the site and can support much more users and groups simultaneously through a single site. So you'll see our products are part of the ETSI standard, and it's also part of the DMR Association. So you'll see at the bottom there, here's some of the other OEMs that are also part of this association, and their products are compatible with Hytera's products. So for example, if you have a conventional tier 2 system, you can have a Hytera repeater, and you can use, for example, a Kenwood DDMA radio, and it will work through the system, similar to the tier 3 as well. Just note that on a tier 2 system, only your voice is part of the ETSI standard, so it is only compatible for group and private calls. But once you start wanting to introduce GPS or any of those data applications, then it becomes proprietary for every OEM, because they have different ways of sending data over the air. So if you want full capabilities on a tier 2 system, it's best to stay to one brand to have all the functions that come with the system. If it's just purely for voice, then it doesn't really matter what product you use, and they will be able to communicate on voice. When it comes to tier 3 trunking, there's much more that's part of the ETSI standards. For example, GPS can work, text messaging can work. I've done tests in the past where I was able to connect Motorola, Sapura tier 3 radios to a trunking light system, and I was able to do the tracking and all of those functions. So just keep in mind that you're not limited on tier 3 as much as what you are limited on tier 2. Okay. This is just some market stats. So this was back from 2019 or up to 2019. So you'll see the market has very much adopted to DMR. So you can see from 2014 up to 2019, there's been a massive growth in DMR being sold into the market. So many customers have accepted DMR as a standard for their critical communications. You'll also see on the right hand side here, so if we look at the market trends, about 70% of two-way radio mission critical sales for 2019 was DMR, and about 30% was for other products. Could be either FDMA or it could be Tetra. So 70% of the market for 2019 purchased DMR radios. And I think a big reason why it is because it could be a lot of people are migrating from analog to digital, and it's much more cost effective to migrate to DMR than to Tetra or to FTMA, because the radios are also backward compatible for DMR radios. Okay, to the next slide. Okay, so just some history about Hytera and where Hytera has been. So in 2005, Hytera joined the DMR ETSI standard, and then in 2009, Hytera released their first DMR radios, and in 2010, Hytera was the first company to introduce a DMR Tier 3 trunking system, which is the Tier 3 Pro. I'll also be explaining more details, the difference between a Hytera Tier 3 Pro and a Lite system. In 2012, Hytera introduced the DMR trunking Lite system. In 2014, Hytera shipped over 1 million DMR terminals. And then in 2017, we introduced what we call a DMR trunking cube, which is an integrated base station. So it's very compact, all-in-one device. And then we also introduced our LTE DMR multi-mode terminals. I think this was back in 2018. So we'll be discussing the multi-mode radios on Thursday, and some benefits that you would have if you had to introduce a multi-mode to a customer. So this is just the Hytera's history on DMR. So it's dating back from 2005. Can everybody hear me clearly? Is there any questions that anyone has up to this point? Okay. Right, so there's just some stats where we have sold DMR trunking. So we own about 70% of the market share globally on DMR trunking systems that have been sold. Currently, we have in South Africa, we've got 3 trunking systems deployed. The first trunking being a trunking Pro system, which was for Ultron Nexus, which is for the fleet call network. There's also a trunking system that's been deployed for the Navy, and there's now recently also been a trunking system that's going to be deployed for Buffalo City. So we've got 3 systems, trunking systems already deployed in South Africa. We also rank #1 globally on DMR trunking because we've got the biggest market share as well. Okay, so this just gives you some stats on Hytera DMR trunking in China. So we've got about 80% market share in China. We've had about 54,000 repeaters that have been sold there, and over 600,000 terminals. Okay. So if we look at the trunking system, you'll see it's much more advanced than a conventional system. So you'll see at the top, we've got the applications. So the applications could be like a voice recording, which is a DVRS, dispatching, which is for dispatching. Then we've got the network management software, which is used for managing the subscribers on the system, as well as the sites. And then we also have what we call command and control, or ICC, which is a all-in-one smart one solution where you can interface different systems as well as CCTV into a single dispatching platform to have unified communication. If we go to the network layer, so in any trunking system, there's always an MSO. So an MSO is your mobile switch office. So all the sites that are connected to this system needs to be connected to the MSO. The MSO is like your switch. So every single registration, every single call that goes through the system gets routed through the MSO. So for example, if let's say a radio was registered to an indoor base station and moves and registers to an outdoor base station, it will register on the MSO, and the MSO will keep track of every single subscriber in the network. The reason why this is a very important component is because, let's say if I was registered to an indoor base station and wanted to make contact to a radio in the outdoor base station, the MSO will route my call to that specific user, and it will then just key up the repeaters where I'm connected and the person that I want to talk to. So you also have a lot more efficiency in not keying up all the repeaters at the same time. Okay, so we also look at PSTN gateway. So you can also connect a PSTN gateway to the MSO, which will allow for you to be able to make calls from a radio to a cell phone through the public network, or you can do it to a landline. You can also, with this specific gateway, which is typically we would use the smart one here, you can also interface it to a Tetra system. If it's a non-Hytera Tetra system, we've got what we call a wireless gateway, and we can connect a Tetra mobile to that wireless gateway to give you access to the Tetra network. And then also you can connect the trunking system also to a DMR conventional system. And then now more recently, a lot of people have adopted the POC as well, which is push over cellular. And this would allow for you to be able to communicate from a PTT device to a trunking radio or to a conventional radio. So we do have the capabilities of having cross communication between all these different networks to our trunking solution. And then at the bottom, we have the different terminals we offer. So from the PD6 series radio, these radios support trunking all the way to the multi-mode radios as well, and then our mobiles as well. Okay. So we have three different types of trunking systems. So we've got a trunking pro, a trunking light, and then a trunking cube. The trunking cube, like I mentioned before, it was introduced back in 2017, and you can have up to 4 carriers in a single trunking cube base station. On a trunking pro system, you can have up to 48 repeaters, which gives you over 80 channels on a single site. On a trunking light solution, you can have up to 16 repeaters, which can give you 32 less 1, so you can have 31 channels on a trunking light system. Okay, so let me go into the different details. So if we look at the trunking pro system, you'll see that the architecture and the hardware is different compared to the trunking light. So you'll see it's got what we call blades that can slide into the base station. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see these are your repeaters or your channels. Then you've got your base station controller, which is the controller that connects to the MSO, as well as it controls the channels that are being used in the system. And then we've got what we call the power supply or PSU, and this is what gives power to the site. You'll also see maybe here at the bottom right-hand corner, this system has full redundancy. So for example, let's say if one of the channels had to fail, the second channel will take over the control channel. And then also same for the controller, for base station controller. If one base station controller had to fail, the second base station controller can take over the site, and similar for the power supply. So you can have dual power supplies. If the one had to fail, the second power supply will take over the power. This is a very a nice solution for a customer that wants reliable mission critical communications and wants to make sure that there's redundancy. Should one of the components fail, there would be a backup repeater or a backup power supply to take over the actual site. You'll also see with the trunking pro system, it also has what we call tri-diversity. So tri-diversity is a technology that's mostly adopted by Tetra systems. So instead of the repeater only having a single receiver, it's got 3 receivers. So this improves your coverage with up to 30%. And I'll explain how this works. So for example, if you have a single receiver and you can only have 1 antenna that you would use for receiving, by having tri-diversity, you can have 3 antennas installed on 3 different, like on a single site, you can have 3 antennas on 3 different angles, which will then receive signal from 360 degrees. So it improves your coverage as well. And like I mentioned, you can have up to 48 carriers on a single site, meaning 48 repeaters, and every repeater gives you 2 time slots, and you'll only use one of the repeaters times slots for a control channel. And then also, like I mentioned before, it's got the blade design. It's also hot swappable. So for example, if you have the 2 power supplies here, if I had to pull out the one, it will seamlessly, the second power supply will seamlessly take over and give power to the site. Same for the base station control units. If I had to remove one, it will automatically switch over to the second one seamlessly without any interruptions on the services. Same with the voice channels. If I had to remove the primary channel, which is running the control channel, if I had to remove it, the second one will immediately take over that responsibility of being the control channel. Okay, so that's on the Trunking Pro system. Then if we look at the Trunking Lite system, so you'll see it uses the RD985S repeater. So there's two models on the repeater. So you get the RD985 and the 985S. So the 985S can operate as a conventional tier 2 repeater, and you can then upgrade the repeater with a license for it to be able to work on a tier 3 system. You'll also see, if we look at the base station on the left-hand side here, you'll see there's a server installed here, which is your base station control unit. So similar to the Trunking Pro, where it's got a base station control unit that looks like this. Yeah, it's an actual server that's running the base station control software. It's a Linux operating system, so it's very stable. And this base station control unit controls the repeaters on the actual site, the control channel, and also the resources that are available. And this also then communicates back via IP to the MSO, which then gives the connectivity to the rest of the network. You'll also see that you can have it as a centralized or a non-centralized network. So if it's a centralized network, it means you've got an MSO and all the sites are connecting to that MSO. If it's a non-centralized network, it means that one of the base station control units will have the MSO also running on it, but you're only limited up to 5 sites. If you exceed 5 sites, you would have to have a dedicated MSO to support multiple sites, over 5 sites to be connected. You'll also see there is also some redundancy in this. You can also set up the system that if the primary repeater that's running the control channel had to fail, the secondary repeater can also then take over the control channel. There's also some intelligence in here. So if the site detects that there is some interference, it will then switch off that specific channel for that time period until the interference goes away, to avoid the user having some problems being able to communicate because of interference, to also keep the reliability of the system up all the time. You'll also see we also have an option on the RD985S for a 100-watt repeater. This is used typically if you have combining equipment and your losses to your antenna is a lot. You can also purchase a 100-watt repeater, which will then accommodate the losses that you have between the antenna and the repeater because of the combining equipment. And it's also a very cost-effective solution. Okay, it's available in VHF and UHF. Okay, and then we have what we call the DMR Trunking Cube base station. So this is an all-in-one base station. So inside this cube, it's got a base station control unit. It's got a repeater. You can have up to 4 carriers or 4 repeaters in a single cube, and it's license unlockable. And then it has an external power adapter which converts AC to DC. I think it operates on 48 volts if I'm not mistaken. We'll check it now. But yeah, what's nice about this cube station, base station, is that you can mount it to the side of the mast and just give power to it and run your antennas to the top of the mast. It's also IP IP67, so it can withstand rain, weather, all those type of things, and also it can support temperatures of -40 up to 50 plus, and it only weighs 26 kilograms. So it's a very compact base station. And also, if you were to use all 4 carriers on the single site, it's also very power efficient. So it only uses 550 watts of power consumption when it's transmitting with all the channels all the time. Okay, and it can also be used for flexible deployment in emergency situations. Okay, so if we look at the MSO for the DMR Trunking Pro, so a single MSO can support up to 256 sites or it can support up to 2048 channels. So channels meaning repeaters. So across your entire network, you can have up to 2048 repeaters connected, and the MSO can support those channels. You'll also see the subscribers. You can support up to 100,000 subscribers, and the max amount of concurrent calls, meaning simultaneous calls happening at a single point in time through the system, can be up to 2,000 conversations. And then for dispatching, this is for tracking and voice dispatching, you can have up to 200 dispatchers logging into the system to be able to communicate and have access to the tracking information, text messaging to handle emergency calls, or just to have communication to the radios. And then what we also get is what we call the network management software, which is the software that you use to manage the network. So from this software, you can create subscribers, you can add channels to the system, or if you're expanding on the system, you would use this single software package to configure new sites or to change frequencies. Your alarms, everything comes through the same software. And then for PSTN Gateway, this is for you to be able to connect to external, like to the public network. You can also have 2 times E1 PSTN gateways, which is 120 telephone lines connecting into the network. You'll also see here we've got what we call a MTU, which is a media translating unit. So this converts the AMBE vocoder protocols to a G711, which is a sub protocol for the system to convert the audio to an understandable format for a PSTN gateway to be able to accept that audio. Okay. This is typically what you would have on a trunking light system. So you'll see the architecture is a lot the same. So you'll have your server, which will run your MSO software. You can have 50 sites connecting to this MSO. If there is a requirement to exceed this, it is possible for us to exceed 50 sites connecting to an MSO. And then a single MSO can also support 200 repeaters, 10,000 subscribers. For the dispatch workstation, which is for the dispatching, you can have 20 dispatchers logging into the system. And then for the network management client, you can have 20 clients logging in and monitoring the network at a single point in time. You'll also see you can also have 2 times E1 PSTN gateways connected to the system as well, for 120 voice or VoIP lines for external phone calls into the public network. This is just what the network management software looks like. So you'll see on the left top, this is your visual topology. So from here, you can see if there's any alarms or any fault on any of the sites, it will actually have like a red glow around it. And when you click on it itself, it will actually tell you what the alarm is. For example, on a Trunking Pro system, you can actually it will show you on which actual component is having the problem. So it could be interference, there could be a power problem, or any of that, or VSWR. All of that will be monitored from the network management software, and you can immediately see what the fault is and be able to either remotely fix it, or if it can't be done remotely, you can then dispatch a technician team to go out to the site to go and inspect. You can also monitor all the channels. You can do your configurations, add subscribers, add groups on it. You can also do remote programming via the network management software. So if there's a specific subscriber in the system that you are going to be changing to belong to a different group, or wanting to change a ID, you can do all of that through the network management software. So once the radios are configured and programmed and registered to the network, from here on, you would not need to reprogram those radios. You can do all of that from the network management software. You can also do remote upgrading. Sorry, one slide back. So remote upgrading is, let's say if there's a new firmware that was released for the system, you can remotely upgrade the site with the latest firmware. And then you can also have performance stats. So you can see the activity that's gone through your network. You can see the average call duration. You can see how many calls were made in a time period. And you can then also run reports to see all of this information. Sorry, let's go back. And then Also, the fault management, you can run reports to see what faults happened on the system during that specific time. Okay, so again, if we look at the architecture, as I explained it before, so you have your network management, which is for you to monitor the network. You've got your MSO connecting to the network management. You've got your DWS dispatch workstation also connected to the MSO, and your DVRS, which is your digital voice recording server. And then from the MSO, you would have your actual sites connecting. You can have up to 16 MSOs connecting to each other. So you can have a massive network. I think if I remember correctly, you can have 1,600 base station sites connecting over multiple MSOs. Even though there's never been a customer that needs such a big network, but it can support it as well. Okay. Is there any questions anyone has before I continue? Let me just see, I think there was one or two messages. Is the NMS free? Okay, so the network management software is not a free software. When you order the system, it's included with the system. Without the network management software, you are not able to configure or set up the system. So it's a key component to have, and it's part of the entire solution, and it's a license and it's a cost. Okay. There is a different package which is called XNMS, which is a different, and that's for your conventional and XPT. But for tier 3 trunking, you need to have NMS software for you to be able to configure the system and monitor the network. Okay. Okay, so this is just the dispatch workstation. So before Smart 1 was introduced, there's also what we call DWS. And this is a dispatching software package that connects to the system, and it allows you to be able to do voice calls, overwrite, kill, stun, revive, do short messages, status messages. You can monitor the channels from here. You can do GPS history. You can do live GPS tracking. You can do geofencing, as well as event logs, so you can see when a radio was switched on, when the radio was switched off, what activity went through the network. You can see all of this from the DWS, but you can also see this information from the DVRS. Okay, so that's just the DWS. So the DVRS, which is the voice recording system, so this records every single conversation, every single activity that goes through the system. So you can see at any point in time how many radios are registered to the network. You can also do specific searches for specific voice recordings or for specific text messages. And you can then also play back the audio from the DWS software, or you can download the recording and then share that recording to a specific person that's looking for a recording. You'll see it's basically the DVRS is connected to the MSO, and every single conversation that goes through the MSO also gets sent through to the DVRS, where it then gets recorded. Okay. So the terminals, so like I explained before, so from the PD6 series, this supports tier 3 trunking, the PD7, PD9, X1, PD7, the EX, which is the 8X models, as well as the multi-mode PDC 760, and then the ND 785. Okay, so we can go through the details of these terminals again. So you'll see you get 3 different models in the PD6 series. So the 605, 0 meaning no screen, no keypad, just the speaker microphone. The 685, which is the screen, sorry, this is actually PD665. So this has got a screen semi-key, and then the 685, which is the one on the right, this has got a full keypad and a screen. And you'll see it supports UHF and VHF. And it's a 5-watt VHF and a 4-watt UHF. Okay, so that's the PD6, it's IP67. Then you've got the PD7, so you've got 2 models, 705 and 785, non-screen, non-keypad, screen, full keypad. And then you also have the X1P, which is a slim COVID type of radio. It also is the most compact DMR radio available. And it has built-in Bluetooth built-in GPS, all of that as well, and it's IP67. So if you buy this PD785 or X1 or PD6 and you want it to work on a trunking system, you then have to also buy the Tier 3 upgrade license for you to have access to the trunking services on the radio. And then the PD985, which is a more or newer model, which came out back in 2018. This also has a built-in, it can support a micro SD card, so you can also have onboard recordings on this radio. And it's also a duplex radio. So if you have 2 of these radios connected to a Tier 3 system, you can do full duplex calls as well from this radio, meaning audio in and out at the same time, like a cell phone call. And then the PD715 and 795EX, which is the 8X models. These are for your type of customers that need IS radios, so your oil and gas, your mining, firefighting. So anywhere where there's high explosive gases and there's an IS requirement, these radios are the correct radios to use because they're 8X, which is an international standard for IS radios. And then the MD785, which is the mobile radio. So if you buy this MD785 out of the box, it's a conventional radio. Then if you add the Tier 3 trunking license to it, you can then program this radio to work on a trunking system. Okay. Also, to share some information, so with our solution, it also has what we call API. So if there's a third-party company that wants to develop their own software or wants to send information into the Hytera software, this is also possible through our API. That company would just need to sign an NDA for us to share the information to them so they can then develop their own software to pull information from the system. Okay, so it's a low-cost solution. So where this is applicable is if, let's say, a customer starts off with a small system, you can sell them an RD985S repeater. At some point in time, they're going to need more capacity, so you can then upgrade that system either to an XPT system or XPT multi-site, or you could upgrade it immediately to a Tier 3 light system and then have a trunking system. So you don't need to have a trunk system from the word go. You can start off small as a conventional system. So you also see for you need less infrastructure. So because it's DMR versus LTE or other technologies, a DMR site typically gives you a lot bigger range. Here's a comparison. So for a single DMR site, you need only 1 repeater, where with an LTE system, you would need 5 to 10 base stations. And because of the Trunking Pro, which supports dry diversity, it also can expand your coverage as well from a single site. The migration, so this I explained before. So from an RD985S as a conventional multi-site, can be upgraded to a trunking light system by adding a base station control unit or a server here with the software, and then loading licenses onto these repeaters for them to be able to work on a Tier 3 system. And then you would also need to get or purchase a MSO and then the network management software. Okay, we also have this solution, which is an MPT DMR hybrid system. So MPT is previously or equivalent to a Tier 3 system, but for analog radios. So we have a solution which is called the MPT DMR hybrid base station. So you would have 1 repeater operating as your DMR control channel, and you'll have a second repeater operating as an analog control channel, and then the remaining repeaters will be adaptive according to what instructions are being sent either via DMR radio or analog radio, and these repeaters can then either operate as a DMR or as an analog channel. Okay. This is a very good solution if you have a customer that's got an MPT system and is looking to migrate to DMR trunking. You can introduce this to him, and they can still use their existing MPT radios working through this site, and then they can start replacing their radios to DMR radios, and then also immediately benefit the DMR trunking. Okay, so high reliability. So I've already explained previously the difference of redundancy. So you can have a backup MSO redundancy. You can have a geo redundancy, meaning MSO at 2 different locations. if, let's say, a building where the one MSO was bombed or destroyed, or there was a fire, you can have another MSO in a different location that can take over the responsibilities of the primary MSO. Same for the base station. You can have multiple base station controllers, and also your repeaters can have backup. If one repeater had to fail, the second repeater can take over the responsibility of the control channel. And then your applications, which is your network management software for you to monitor, your dispatching system, and your recording as well. You can then collect the information from the MSO. It also supports what we call end-to-end encryption. So if you have encryption on your network, you can have an encryption on the radio. It will transmit that encryption to the site, where it will then encrypt it all the way to the second base station site, and it will then send the encrypted over the air. The system also supports what we call ESN, electronic serial number checks. So when you're creating subscribers on the network management software, you can use the electronic serial number. So if that serial number is not captured in the database, the radio will not be able to register to the system. So it prevents illegal subscribers from accessing the system. And then you can also do AIE, which is also encryption for you to be able to have encryption from end to end. And then I also explained the frequency, so the interference detection it supports. So if there's interference, it will then disable that channel for that time period. When no interference is detected anymore, it will then make the channel available again. Okay. Go to the next slide. Okay, so it's easy maintenance with intelligent applications. So you can also set up the NMS software that if there's a fault on the system, it can also go via GSM model to send a message to a cell phone, where you then get an SMS on your phone to say there's a problem, and you can then respond to it. Or you could have it go to an email. So you'll get an email on your emails saying there's an alarm that was triggered on a site, and then you can immediately react to it. Or you can monitor it from the actual NMS software. And then also the over-the-air programming. So you can do, once you've initially programmed the radio to register to the site, and there's any changes that you want to do afterwards, or more sites are being added to the system, from the network management software, you can add those additional sites and the programming to the radio without you needing to manually bring the radio in for programming. Okay. We can also do SCADA over our trunking system. So you could have DMR radios connected to our base stations, and then via the software you can also do commands to telemetry devices or sensors to monitor certain things like water levels, electricity flow, or any faults can then be detected as well through a SCADA gateway. Okay. And then we also what we call simulcast. So simulcast is a system where, let's say, you're limited to frequency. We can also, with the same infrastructure, do what we call simulcast. So every site will have a server running there with a GPS timer, and it will sync the GPS time across the sites, so that when a person talks into the first site, it will retransmit that same frequency across all the sites at the same time, which is what a simulcast system does. Okay, and then we also have what we call a patrol solution. So we have patrol checkpoints that work with batteries that can send a pulse, and if a radio comes close to that beacon, it can then detect that signal, and it will then report that information to the patrol software here. So you can then see exactly what radio was at what time close to what checkpoint. And you can set up specific routes to say every day a radio user needs to start at the gate. When he gets to the gate, his radio will detect the beacon from that checkpoint, and he can then move so on to the next point. Okay. And then also we can also do network analysis to see how your coverage is on your network. There's separate software that we have that we can use to determine how your coverage is and to identify dead spots, and it also helps you to better plan the network. So if, let's say, you've got dead spots in certain areas and you want to improve it, from this software you can actually have a visual of what the signal looks like from the site to the radio, and from the radio to the site. Okay. And then just some other applications we can also connect to our trunking system. So we have what we call ICC, Integrated Command and Control. This is a full-on, this is what you would typically use in a control room, like for government, or in most cases some state security type of customers would use this if they want to monitor not just communication, but have other things like video, surveillance stats, crime hotspots. All of that can highlight and be visually on a map, and you can have CCTV cameras that are installed on, let's say, on next to the road. You can have those feeds coming into it. So if there's an emergency, you can access those cameras from the single dispatcher and have full-on dispatching capabilities. It also supports a call-taking facility. So if, let's say, it's used in a call center, like your 10111, call would come through the telephone system, and the person that will take the call can also then dispatch from the same software to a radio, can enter in the address of the person that reported the incident, and all of that information will be sent through to the terminal, and the terminal then would be able to respond to that. You can also see the status if a person is busy or if they're available. All of that you can do from the ICC. You can also bring in some facial recognition and other intelligent applications. We also have a civil aviation dispatching solution, which has been deployed. I think there was 1 or 2 airports where we've deployed this, where you can then use it for communication to the ground staff. You can also interface airband using the Smart One wireless gateway, and they have full-on dispatching capabilities from a single dispatcher. And then we also have metro dispatching systems. This is used for railway type of companies. And then also have billing and management software. So this would be used for an operator if you're building a network to run it as an operator and on-sell the services to smaller companies. You can also do billing as well from the system. Okay. And then here's just some references where we've deployed our DMR trunking systems. So we've done over 600 DMR trunking networks worldwide with over 1 million terminals in over 80 countries. We've catered for operators like Fleetcor here in South Africa, for energy, some energy companies, public safety, public utilities, for transportation, and also for some events. So here's just some case studies that we've done. So we'll go to the first one. This one was one that was done in APEC, Papua, which is in New Guinea. So this was a DMR trunking system that was deployed with an ICC. So here's some visuals of the design. Here's another one that we've done in Russia for the FIFA 2018. So it was one MSO with a network management DWS and a DVRS. There was 22 base stations and over 4,000 radios, and it was used for them to be able to communicate throughout this event. There's another one we've done, which is in Europe, the largest DMR network in Croatia. So it had 4 MSOs, 120 base stations, and over 5,000 radios that are connected. And I can see from the pictures, the fire department was using it, the police were using it, and they were able to communicate in incidents where they needed to address, let's say, like a fire or a riot or anything through the system. And then in Philippine National Police, they're using also our DMR Trunking 3 system. So they've got 3 MSOs with 15 Trunking Pro base stations and 99 repeaters and over 30,000 radios. Okay. Here's another case study where we've deployed our trunking solution. So you'll see 117 trunking base stations with 4 MSOs. So the MSOs would be for backup. You'll also see there's a POC 6000 connected to this system, meaning PTT, with a Smart One dispatch. So this system was deployed to have the option for you to be able to If you move out of your trunking coverage, you can still use PTT to communicate back to your radios and vice versa. And then also Metro in Barcelona, so over 1,000 radios, 55 indoor base stations with 3 outdoor base stations and 1 MSA. Here's another one for Saudi Arabia Airline. So they've got 1 MSO, 8 DVRSs, and 8 base stations with 6 dispatchers and 10 BDAs. So BDA bidirectional amplifiers, which is for indoor coverage, and then 6,000 radios that are connected to the system. And then also for New Zealand, for a company called PowerCo, which is like the Eskom of South Africa, but for New Zealand, they also deployed a DMR trunking system. So they've got 14 base stations, which was completed for phase 1, and then 20 base stations, which was completed for phase 2 with 1 MSA. And then another one here for a Russian oil pipeline company, where they've got over 3,000 ATEX radios connected over 204 base stations with 4 MSOs. Okay, and then FleetCor, which is the South Africa here where we are. So for FleetCor, they've deployed over 140 DMR trunking sites and over 8,000 radios that are registered to this network. And here was some feedback from Brett Nash when he was still the managing director for Altec Radio Holdings before it became Ultranexus. Okay, and then also for the Shenzhen Police, another case study. So you'll see this is quite a big system, over 40,000 radios, over 84 bidirectional amplifiers, and 169 base stations underground for the Metro, and 105 base stations above ground for the police. And they've got an MSO with a backup redundancy. Okay, thank you so much. Is there any questions anyone has or want me to go through again? Let me just see. I see Ian did ask something. Are dedicated links still recommended, or can other example VPN be used to connect sites? Okay, so to answer the question for Ian, you can connect sites via a VPN as well, as long as the sites can communicate to each other via IP. It's possible to use a VPN as well. So a VPN is a virtual private network which can run over a ISP network, and it is possible to do it like that, yes. Anything else anyone else wants to know? Let me just see if I missed any questions. Let me see how much time we still have left. Okay, so we've got 10 minutes left. If there's any other questions anyone has, you can ask. I will also share this presentation with everyone, and then there's also going to be a recording of this, which we'll also share to everyone. If there's anything that anyone wants to go really look at, you all will be more than welcome to listen or to watch the video. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Yeah, then that's the end of today's session. We'll do a session again on Thursday where we'll be discussing the multi-mode radios. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining for today, and we'll see you again on Thursday. Let me just see, there's another message. Okay, thanks. You're welcome, Ian. Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good Tuesday, and then we'll see each other again on Thursday.
Thank you, Franco.
Okay, pleasure.
Cheers, Franco.
Cheers. Chad.